Well, good evening. I'm going to try to talk about some more prophecy and hopefully bring a few more ideas to light a little bit. Things that I've discovered going over and over these verses. And the one in particular that I'm looking at is the book of Daniel, chapter 12, which relates to Michael standing up. And of course, this is still based on Revelation 12:7 that says there's a war in the heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. That just so happened to be talked about right after the woman gives birth in Revelation 12:6. But no, after she goes into the wilderness, that's when the battle starts. But before they went into the wilderness, I might as well go into this while I'm here. Revelation 12:5 says that she brought forth a man-child. Let me go back over here to that. I never know what I'm going to do here, so but at least I queued up a few things. Anyway, so after the Revelation 12:4 says that, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, talking about the dragon's tail. It's Lucifer's tail, and that's actually, tail is used to indicate the mammalian nature of the Luciferians. That they did not graduate out of their mammal condition. And that's a condition of both mind and body. Even though Lucifer and his fallen angels had a chance to outgrow it, and they had outgrown certain aspects of it, I imagine. I can't speak for anyone in particular, of course, but enough to where they were given an infant vehicle and in the next level and a spacecraft to perform what Doe called elementary tasks, which I equate with being like a watcher, like I've talked about before. Like Enoch talked about, a watcher, and a son of God, as in Genesis 6. A son of God doesn't mean that it's a good son. It doesn't mean that the son is actually working for his father, for his older member. It just means that he's young, he's an offspring of the father, and he's young compared to his father. But that doesn't mean he's young compared to us. Even Lucifer can be very old and experienced compared to us. Even more so than us, but doesn't mean that he has the recognition that we can have, because he can't have that anymore because he already aborted so much of the next level information and mind that he's now completely living as a mammal in all his desires. Desires to preserve his life, which I can understand, I guess, having that desire. But not at the cost of going against his older member. If we try to preserve our life by denying our older member, then we're not going to be seen by our older member probably as deliverable, savable, for a future opportunity to grow into membership in the next level. Because the next level isn't interested in halfway, I don't believe. I mean, they know that we're not going to get all the way right away. Okay, that's a given, although theoretically, who knows what's possible in that regard. But in any case, even if you were an advanced student and you moved very quickly in terms of growing towards the next level of membership, the next level, a big part of the process is stamina, having stamina and durability, and developing the strength of steel in your mind. And that only comes by experiences, and difficult experiences, and experiences that aren't normal to a human condition. So that's what makes them difficult. It's not the same kind of difficulty as you have when someone's climbing Mount Everest, which requires a certain amount of mental strength, and to make the body keep on going, and physical strength for the body to keep on going. And people train for that. Okay, but that only gets you to the top of a mountain. And yes, it's like Jesus said, give to prophets what prophets deserve, and give to remember the next level what who actually earns their overcoming. Give them what they deserve as eternal life. But definitely everything has to be earned. There's nothing that's nothing is given for free that becomes automatic for us. In other words, we're freely implanted with, well, implant is not the right word, deposited with next level container, or next level soul pocket, or the chip set that is deposited in the human vehicles, that is like a seed, like Jesus talked about, and a soul that was shown to be given to Adam through mind, through the breath of the older member, which is a way of depicting giving their mind to their student, enough to where they become a living soul at that point. And if that's not given to somebody, then they don't have that capacity. And yet their spirit can still develop, because the spirit is synonymous with mind. Because that's actually comes with the genetic structure, the development of mind from that structure as that baby grows. But when that baby's born, that baby has no mind except for whatever it got in programming from the mom and dad sperm, or however that happened, whether it was in a test tube or however it happened. But anyway, the tail actually represents not only like the mammalian tail that's that's still on the animal species, and that humans say that our human bodies have the remnant of at the base of our spine. That's what that's depicting. It was human desires and human sensuality and human family and human likes and dislikes that actually resulted in a third of the stars falling from heaven. In other words, those associates with Lucifer, that he was tempting them with that tail. I don't know how he did it exactly, what he said, what he did, or you can even look at it as the slang of woman's rear. When I was growing up as a kid, my vehicle when I was growing up was called, like, if you got sex with that person, that female, then you got some tail. So that's even indicating that sexuality is what brought them down. And so in Genesis chapter 6, where it says that they came to that the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and that's daughters of humans, and impregnated them and caused them to bear giants or great individuals. But those giants were consuming humans, maybe in more ways than one, maybe by even eating their flesh potentially, because they were very violent, and the next level hated what was happening, and they were being taught things. The humans were being taught things by those fallen angels, like magic, and taught things that would look good to us now to learn, like the use of herbs for healing, and for whatever other usages they may have for them. Were some of the things that Enoch talked about. They were being taught, and the next level didn't want that to happen, and didn't at that time, because they're regulating what we're ready for. Because if we develop a trust in, like, herbs to heal our problems, and we stop asking God to do it, then pretty soon we're going to devolve into creatures that don't have any recognition of God, because we don't think we need Him. We don't think we need the next level. And the fact is that we do need the next level, because the next level is the only reason we exist. And so logic would say that we need the next level in order to exist. And what that really translates to is that exists beyond this life, and maybe even exists within the life of the vehicle that we're in. Because the next level, if they see somebody actually communicating with them, seeking their mind, and wanting to abide by their instructions, their schoolroom directions for that classroom, for that grade in school, then they want to help that individual as much as possible, and so they're going to be inclined to help those individuals avoid destruction of their bodies, the physical bodies, and or minds by the Luciferian attack. So they'd be protected in some regard, and so that they can experience the full breadth of their human incarnation, or if it's the first time deposit for that human vehicle is given a deposit of a soul, then for whatever the lesson plan is, they want whenever the next level deposits souls, it's with the intention of giving them the opportunity to grow to fruition, and to grow towards producing fruit, becoming a flower instead of just a plant, flowering, and something that's useful to the next level, producing service. And so the next level is going to want to preserve that seed, whether we're talking about the genetic seed, but we're also talking about potentially the spirit seed. I don't know if that's the right way to talk about it. I can't say that Tiendo ever talked like that, but indirectly, they talked about how the species, the strain of human, is prepared for the next level, And so that our ancestors of these vehicles, everything they experienced became the strain that was also the provision of the lessons that needed to be learned. And some of the lessons might have been learned early on in that strain, to where in this lifetime, individuals come into this lifetime as children, billions of them on Earth right now, and they come into knowing a bunch of things, even though they might not say how they know it, or they won't be able to tell how I know it, like because I read this book when I was in a previous lifetime. I mean, there's people that do the past regressions, and there may be some accuracy to some of that coming out as having some accuracy, but it's very fallible to put any stock in that, except for like maybe a hint or something, but it's also detrimental to the further growth to be basing who we are in our minds as who we might have been in a past incarnation, because a past incarnation would automatically mean that that all that we achieved then can be less than what we can achieve in this current incarnation. So yes, we should celebrate that we have the common sense to see through a lot of the fallacies, but that celebration should only be, well, I shouldn't say should, but in order to take the full benefit of it, would be directed towards thanking the next level and asking for more help to take our next step, so that we can rise up to their standards for this current incarnation, because it's going to be different for this current incarnation for us than it was any time previous. And we're going to have more challenges because we can handle more challenges. And a big challenge is also the challenge of the mind. Like even believing that UFOs are from outer space is a big step to take, and that can really trouble somebody who's not ready for it. That can really throw them out of whack with their worldview and make them think that it's a total illusion. So if you give that to somebody before they're ready for it, or before they have the potential to rise up to recognizing the reality of that, then they could probably be damaged as a plant. It's like giving a plant too much fertilizer. The fertilizer is a negative in a sense that it's difficult to take for the plant, but a certain amount of it stimulates growth of that plant. And so that's where the negative helps in the growth. It's like the acid as opposed to the alkaline, I guess, although I know both can have their negatives, but depending on what organ they're in, but where that chemical balance is. But so that's the whole thing about the tail there that I can think of. And if you research it more into the Old Testament, you'll see more references to the use of the same word, and how, and it's the same thing related to what Jesus said, that you can only have one master, and it's either got to be God or Mammon. Well, there's that Mammon with that mammalian. And Tiendo talked about the term mammalian for humans, and they also said that the Luciferian space alien souls were human equivalents. So they were mammal-human equivalents. Because they hadn't overcome their mammalian characteristics. So they still want the same things in their programming. And what they want is what they're going to do. And what they're going to do is all the things humans do. They're going to try to get their agenda taken care of. They're going to be self-centered, the way a mammal is. A mammal is self-centered, but they're built that way. It doesn't mean that they don't have any selflessness. They do, because the next level designed them too. And so the next level designed them with also the seeds of the capacity to be selfless. Like when you see like an animal saving another animal. Like I've seen a number of videos that could have been made up, but they would have been pretty hard to make. You know, even in this idea, this CGI world that we have, where you think you can pretty much do anything, but it takes a lot of software development to do some of these things. And I saw like what did I see? I saw a dog, I think, saving another animal, or maybe it was a cat, or like a lion, or not a lion, but some kind of a big cat, like an African feline cat. Isn't that funny that it's called feline cats? Anyway, but I haven't really investigated that much, but let me move on with Revelation 12:4. I know I've been through this before, but I get new ideas, and I want to broaden them out a little bit if I have the mind to do it, the energy to do it. And I seem to have it right this minute, so I'm going to go with it. But because it talked about here how, I'm going to switch over to this other view, talked about is that cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman. So that means that the dragon had a physical presence in view of the woman. And then that doesn't mean that, actually that might mean exactly what it says, because Tiendo had that experience in the bookstore where that T told us about. That Doe had this experience where he saw his adversary, and his adversary, I don't know if Tiendo ever exactly said it, but is Lucifer. Now it's the main adversary of Doe, of Jesus, was Lucifer. Every step of the way, it was called Satan. That's what it means. Adversary and Satan is the same word. And whether there's an individual named that or not, I don't know. It seemed like that man, Rael, who considers himself the Maitreya, and at one point he was saying he was the Christ, but he stopped saying that. Maybe because he got too much flack, I don't know. But the Maitreya is basically the same thing, but more in the Tibetan Buddhist way of thinking and talking of a returned Christ. Anyway, but which I'm not saying that isn't the proper prophecy for the future, for the return, for Jesus' arrival. And then therefore for the current arrival that just took place with Doe's arrival. But whenever it says stand, that means that there's a stalk, there's a plant that they're standing in. Okay, and so they never described, Tiendo didn't describe what Doe experienced in that bookstore in the Portland area, I believe it was. But they just said that Doe was scared, was frightened by it, the experience. And T said that he saw his booger. That's what they called the adversaries. That was assigned to him to be his adversary, because that would enable him to conquer that adversary like he did when he became Enoch when he was incarnate in a vehicle named Enoch, he conquered the adversary, and then therefore he was able to leave with his body. Because he had a body that was changed over by conquering the adversary. And he was fallen by the adversary when he was in the vehicle Adam. And T is the one that said that Doe was Adam and Enoch and Moses and Elijah and Jesus, and now returning for the 6th time, which was as one of the 2 witnesses. And then the end of the 6th time, the beginning of the 7th time, which also has an end, as the return of the same soul that was incarnate in Jesus, as prophesied. So he was fulfilling that part of the prophecy as well as the 2 witnesses prophecy of bringing updates to the Bible and fulfilling prophecy at that point, and further points after that, all the prophecies. But I don't know if that was a little convoluted to say, but I'm trying to include a lot of stuff in a short space, and hopefully it's making sense. And if it doesn't, ask me questions on the video, and I'll try to clarify what I was talking about. But so standing, and then before means in view of, in the presence of, before, like down here, in the face of, and that's face, literally or figuratively, but all these prophecies in the book of Revelations do translate to something literal. That's why the mystery wasn't available, because it was kept a mystery, because in their form, they're given as symbols. A dragon. Well, Lucifer's not a dragon. He doesn't have I don't think he operates a body that looks like a big snake that's got wings. Okay? And that trumps around on all 4s. But the characteristics of a dragon, Lucifer has. In symbolic ways and in mammalian ways. 4 appendages, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, this is the reason why Christians have a real hard time. Even they don't say they have a hard time most of the time. I mean, when you see it written down, that when they're giving their compilations of translations of the Book of Revelations, they don't. You don't see the struggle they went through, and I'm not saying they didn't go through a big struggle. They no doubt did, because it's not easy to translate this into something real. And so they went through history a lot of times, the people that did this the most, to try to line up all these things. I remember watching, I think his name was Van Ippy's, I forgot his first name, something Van Ippy. He was on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, which is out of California, with the Crouches, who were always very odd to watch. We watched them when I was in the group on satellite dish while we were camping outside in the Phoenix desert, just west of Phoenix, and we were watching him talk about the Book of Revelations, talking about as fast as I am, but with like fact after fact after fact about the wars in the 1000 and the 500s and ever since Jesus, he was talking about all the different things and the kings and everything, and all things that happened in history that he was saying represent this verse in Revelation and this verse in Revelation. He had them all pretty much done. I don't know that there was anything that he didn't have something to say about, and it was very convincing, especially when you don't have anything else to go by. So, and of course, there's many people that have written books and blogs about translations and interpretations of all these things, and But what they all do is they're referring to distant past events, usually very distant, and they're all like also that's how they're making it literal, but there's many clues in the Revelation that show you that they're talking about the end times, and that and like Jesus said, it would be in the new age. And an age was at least 1,000 years. But Doe said it was 2,000 years for an age. So that's what I think an age is. But humans might think of it as a millennium, as an age. And so Jesus was saying that he was going to return in the new age, and he did. And he returned by the year 2000, because the dates are off. So 1997 is actually during the year 2000. And that's probably why there was such a big thing about the Y2K, crippling the civilization, is because there was this subconscious mind that people could pick up on subconsciously and then translate through their literal understanding of life and everything in the ways that they can, to where they thought that the dates weren't going to work, and so the banks were going to fail and stuff like that was going to happen. And that ended up being a complete illusion, although they had to work hard to try to make all those clocks come out right. And I even did a little bit of that on the software I was working on at the time. But which wasn't a big programming deal, really. I mean, it's just a lot of legwork. That's what it was mainly. Wasn't a lot of intellect needed for that. But so when it says that he's standing before, it's in the face of, before, in the presence of, is very important. In the sight of. So we have that in the bookstore where it took place, because T was there too in the bookstore, and at this point actually T has already introduced her son, her offspring, the moon, in that relationship, as being the lesser light to the sun that's the greater light, father and son, in that parental kind of analogy. That's all it is. It had nothing to do with the gender, although, I mean, gender has to be overcome, all gender. And gender consciousness, in order to be born into the next level, into an adult body in the next level. If you don't overcome it by the time you're finished with your task, then the next level will bring you back to overcome it next time. And the same with racial consciousness, the same with ethnic consciousness, the same with sexuality consciousness, spiritual consciousness, whatever it is. All that in the human kingdom needs to be swapped out for upgrades that is kin to the next level's thinking and behaviors and ways and their physical bodies that they grow to inhabit, to use as their tool when they're working within the physical world. And they're working within the physical world a lot. They use physical transportation, and they work inside and outside of planets that are physical. So this whole idea that it's a spiritual realm where you float around, and you're gonna have a better life when you die. Some people believe that when you die, you're not dead. You're actually experiencing life eternal at that point, and yet the definition of a discarnate, or the is somebody that's dead. And so if you're dead, then you're not living. It's as plain and simple as that. That's why Jesus said that if you strive to save your life, you will lose it in the next world. So in other words, when you have the opportunity to enter a next level program, and individuals right now are entering the next level program when they talk to Tiendo and they ask to be entered into their program. And however they do that, however they say that, they're doing it. Even if they don't necessarily say it with words, if they just have that desire and they don't really think in terms of Tiendo, maybe they don't know about Tiendo, but people that look up to God and say, look at this world, the way it's fallen apart, and can you give me the next step, Lord? And when the next level knows that they're speaking to them because of probably their history of being primed for that, from whenever they were deposited with a soul, or whenever, which is probably the case, or they wouldn't have that belief even though it could be, well, there's different kinds of soul implants also, and one form might be a tagging, where they're just a way of identifying vehicles to be watched, like the watchers were maybe doing. I don't know what they were watching, but I don't think they were watching necessarily the grass grow, but being silly. But in any case, so the woman here is ready to be delivered. Ready to be delivered also means to produce, ready to produce from seed. And that's more of an accurate way of saying it, even though it's actually another form of saying it would be probably more accurate, and that would be to bring forth, maybe. Because it's not, well, it's not the first time this older member from the next level was born, but we're talking about born of spirit in this case, which is repeated when the older member comes back to do a task. So even when he was born, like Jesus was born of spirit also, when he went through when he completed his overcoming, and went up to that Transfiguration Mount and got his instructions to lay down his body and give up his life, his vehicle's life, for the sake of his task, and the task that his father gave him, for the sake of his older member, and for the sake of the Kingdom of Heaven's program to bring the student body up the next rung on the ladder towards their graduation, which is what Jesus taught. He taught the graduation requirements, according to Tiendo. And so, but the dragon wanted to stop that from happening. So the dragon was going against the delivery, the birth of dough, and that he wanted to devour that child, as it says here. And to devour that child translates to eat down. Eat down. Interesting that it's said that way. Eat down. Okay, now we know that the Luciferians didn't want to sit down and eat the flesh of Doe's vehicle. We're talking about now, anyway, we're talking about the mind that was in that vehicle that was named Marshall Applewhite, that became named Doe. when not right before they adopted us, adopted the student body, that part of the student body, because the part of the student body is here now, still taking over their vehicles. But it's just a more distant classroom. But anyway, so I'm not making it sound like the primary classroom, really the way that word really means. I really shouldn't use probably the word classroom because it's the same word, and that's like, I guess maybe a little bit of a dilution to do that. So I'm gonna say that it's prospective classroom members, for the prospective candidates for the next classroom, and that's me too. I'm a prospective candidate for the next classroom. Sorry, Buster, I had to kill that moth. I don't want planting eggs in my hair. But but devour, to eat down, which means to wear down, right? Other terms that go with that, to live. To live or child. I hadn't thought about it in that sense. The rest being supplied, okay. To eat, okay. Well, eat is also apropos because what happens is by wearing down a member of the next level, by wearing down their mind, by attacking them with doubts or whatever it is, they're actually depleting their energy. And that's actually consuming their body. Because the more energy, the more we're depleted, the more we're wearing out our body. Even though for a lot of years it can be restored. But eventually it takes you out if your body's been really worn down a lot. And that's what I'm going to get to in Revelations 12, where the woman is persecuted. And that means that she is actually being worn down. And that's why she ended up getting cancer in her body, because it was being worn out. Doe said that she was burnt out, is what his words were. And that's not like burnt out by like somebody that's been on substances for many years. They get burnt, strong, like speed or heroin or whatever it is. I mean, you could probably be burnt out by a lot of things. Alcohol you can be burnt out by, I think. It's all kind of burning out the vehicle. It's killing the liver, right? So it's burning out the liver. So, or the lungs with, tobacco. There's all kinds of ways we can, dozens and dozens, but there are options, of course, and there's nothing wrong with getting involved in the options. But the challenge is, when you recognize that it's detrimental to you, whether it's for your health of your body or to your mind and the way you behave with people, the way you treat other people and blah, 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 when someone recognizes the detriment to that, then they have the chance to overcome it. And when they overcome it, their mind grows. And so they have the capacity to overcome more after that. But it takes a toll on the vehicle every time. And so wearing down her child as soon as it was born. And that's like probably in the process. As long as, okay, till it was born. Okay, whensoever it was born. So it doesn't mean that, and birth, actually, when it was produced, when it was brought forth. When was Doe brought forth by T, well, I suspect that, because Doe said that he gave T a real hard time for a period of time while they were traveling back and forth in 1973 and perhaps in 1974. I don't know when it dawned on Doe in the most significant way that T was his elder. But he didn't recognize that right away, I don't think. I think I'm safe to say that his vehicle he didn't draw into that vehicle enough of the mind right away that he would recognize his older member. Because he even said to T when they first met that he didn't recognize her. And T was confused by that because she was also awakening too. But it's a kind of a pre-programmed awakening, but it depends on the vehicle, how fast it can go and what steps can be taken, so that you don't fry that vehicle's brain. Because you could become somebody that then puts a tinfoil hat on and thinks they're from Uranus and that they're here to save the world, and the only thing they ever say about it is dress up like it, save the world, or make emblems of UFOs and talk about UFOs and how they're here for us. They're the Light Brothers, and they're which has a form of truth to it, but at the same time is a deception. So so that's what could possibly happen. I'm just imagining what could possibly happen if too much awakening happens too fast to any one vehicle. Even though I'm sure T and Doe's vehicles were well prepared for this, over time, because they were set aside when they were born. They were tagged, as T and Doe put it, when they were born, and they said that they took vehicles that would have died had they not taken them. So anyway, so what I was getting at, to where part of the devouring, I think, had to do with when T and Doe were arrested. Because that was like a major event for them. And they were already identifying with themselves as being from the next level, both of them. T didn't wake up Doe by telling him things. Things occurred to them together when they were not sitting with each other talking, or they would be doing different things. Whether that was like one was like in their tent or in their bedroom, and the other one in whatever rest chamber they were using, however they were, like in that farmhouse in Warren, Texas, or Bernie, Texas, I think is the way the proper way to say it, Bernie, Texas. But whether they could be doing different things, what they said, in different areas, and then when they would come together and they would talk about the same things that happened, and they weren't dropping acid, to where how people that on acid trips or even strong marijuana will meet somebody for the first time or whatever, and they'll communicate, they'll think they're communicating, and they will agree on everything, and they will think that they're brothers because they agree on everything that they say. They understand everything, and someone else is saying that they feel like they're talking gibberish. So, if somebody else was listening that wasn't stoned like they were, they would say, they're not making any sense at all. And yet the other one's looking at them like they're making total sense. And I experienced that because I experimented with those things. But I'm just using that as an example of what I'm relatively 100% sure didn't happen with T and Do, because I know they weren't into any kind of substance uses or drugs or marijuana or anything like that. They were a bit conservative in that regard. T even wrote about it in the book that she wrote while they were in Bernie, that she started to write. She wrote about how that the drug culture might have even helped stimulate some awareness. And she crossed that out, because I have the draft that she wrote. And I actually have her cross out. That was a year later, when she said she edited it. It is a year later with a pen, and it was typewritten originally. And so she edited it with a pen, and she edited out the part that said that the drug culture might have brought about some awakening. So see, that was her form of awakening, to recognize the truth. Because we would have ideas about things, and she would have ideas about things. I'm not saying that it wasn't me that was there with that, but I've experienced some of this myself, where I have ideas about something, and then it takes a while for me to actually realize what that idea was most focused on. Which happened with me when Destody came to me in a dream, and he said, Obama, when I was asking who to vote for during the first Obama election. And I was asking T and Do if there's any difference if I vote for somebody, and whether I should vote at all. And if so, who should I vote for? And Destody came to me in a dream before I voted, and it was days before I voted, and said Obama. And I thought that was an answer to my question. But I don't think it was really an answer to my question, because I don't think they really cared if I voted or not. But maybe they did care if I voted, because maybe that would also translate down to the strain that might be more inclined to vote for Obama if they received that through the strain. And I'm not saying I'm a big kahuna, okay? And the strain is any individual that has been tagged or has been given a soul automatically has a strain of the human vehicles that were also of some equivalence with my vehicle, for example, in their development. And so it didn't mean that I was above anybody, it just meant that my vehicle had the lessons that needed to overcome, had the characteristics that needed to be overcome for me, the soul, to graduate into the next level, to even recognize T and Do. There could have been thousands that have been given, but they don't need thousands right away. But some of those thousands could still be around now in their vehicles and be the same age as this vehicle, or even older, and could still potentially wake up to the reality of T and Do and take a huge leap in that regard. And maybe during their life as a human, maybe they overcame a lot of the things, or even all of the things that I was spending 19 years trying to overcome. See, that's why we can't judge anybody, because we never know where somebody is at in relationship to the next level. We can only see where they're at the moment, what they're doing. And if they're doing things that are harming other people, that's a sure sign that well, they don't have much mind the next level, But even if they do something to harm somebody, that before they die, they still have the capacity to change from that. It becomes harder, I think, because they're going to have this influence with them that's going to say, even be if they killed people, even be the influences of those that died, laying a guilt trip on them, so they don't deserve to live. They don't deserve to escape what they did. But the next level wouldn't say that to them. The next level would say that the only unforgivable sin is going against me, the next level, which is what Jesus taught. And that means talking against their information as true. So if we're talking against the things that Jesus said, which can happen in several forms of not actually, but not actually translating it the way that it indicates to be translated. Like the eye of a needle should have been translated as, it would be as difficult for a camel to go through the eye of a sewing needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. If he had said it that way, well, I can imagine that Jesus, that both were true. That for the camel to get through the eye of that needle that was the archway couldn't be a total truth as well. But see, if Jesus had said, if it had been translated as sewing needle at that time, then, well, maybe not in the writing so much, but if that eye of the needle didn't exist for the camel that everybody didn't know about, and they thought he was really talking about a sewing needle, they would have really, they would have thought he was like really lunatic, right? Because how is it ever going to be possible for a human being to get through the eye of a sewing needle? But yet he said at the end of saying that with my Father it's possible. So holy smokes, but he wasn't being literal in that context, of course. But it does become literal when you think about it in terms of the mind. The mind has to go through that straight and narrow entrance. That gate is very straight and narrow. Remember they taught that? Jesus taught that? That wide is the gate that leads to destruction. Broad is the gate. But very narrow, straight and narrow is the gate that leads to eternal life. And so that is the eye of the needle, that straight and narrow. But, so anyway, that's kind of the way I see that. So let me move on to this next verse, even though there's probably still more to that one that I could glean from it. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Well, he was going to put a rule on all nations, and that's what he did in 1997 especially, where he said that you have to give your life. You have to lay down your life. You have to stand up for tea and dough. He said it in a lot of ways at different periods of time. You have to separate from the human kingdom. Separate from your family. Separate from your human behaviors. Your sexuality. Your everything. Eventually you have to be separated from everything. Okay? In order to be born into the kingdom of God. Now, when that happens, how fast it happens, and to the degrees that it happens, that's all in the free will between you and your older member. When you seek their mind on what your next step is, and then something happens when there's an opportunity, and you see that opportunity, even though it might be difficult, it probably will be difficult, but it won't be impossible. It won't even be distantly possible. It'll be seen as that if you ask for help, I can get through this, whatever that opportunity is. And so you'll go with it. And I have to say that I think I got that lesson, and I went with it. And I'm not saying that put me right with Doe. It's a step-by-step basis whether I'm right with Doe or not. I'm not right with Doe when I'm giving into human behaviors, and I'm right with Doe when I'm not giving into human behaviors. But if I grow from giving into human behaviors so that I get right with Doe, that's the process. That's the overcoming process. To not give up. To never give up. As soon as we give up and we think that it's not possible anymore, then we're on the road to being lost. Unless we recover from that, even. We can give up and then wake up again. Usually because the next level will put something in our path to help us wake up a little bit more. And so the rod of iron is basically that standard that is not going to be bent. We're not going to be able to bend that standard that the next level wants us to, needs us, not needs us in a way that they need it, but that we need to aspire to in order to qualify to be given a task on a spacecraft, working for other members of the next level, and them in particular are older members, T and Doe. So that's where it's the rod of iron. And ruling all nations is that all the nations, all the people, nations actually means people, but it's, they're all in countries, that's all, part of the way things work out. They're also being subject to the rule. And what is the rule for them? I can imagine that they're the Old Testament rules. You should not kill. You should not steal. Those are all rules for all those that are both Gentile and those that were given deposits in the past, which at this point we have no idea, who is and who isn't one of those. Because there's been so much crossbreeding and everything with people, so it's it's a big mishmash. And so many in the world are being faced with their lessons that are stimulating them to separate from that root system, their human root system, and whether that's a huge hurricane or a tsunami, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, all those natural things, tornadoes, cyclones, forest fires that burn people's homes up and force them to move someplace else, or go back and build again, which to me wouldn't be smart to do relative to the next level, because if it's going to happen again. Just like Tiendo said, the waves were going to be roaring. Jesus said that was going to happen, and also fire was going to be happening. So anything related to fire and water, waves and tsunamis and stuff like that, I'd get away from the coasts and not live in an area that's subject to so much drought, to where the fires will keep on coming back because, for whatever reason, whether it's human things that cause them or lightning. A lot of times lightning is causing these forest fires. And so the next level is actually perhaps sending a storm over there to do that, because they want those people to move out. And you notice how with those kind of things, with many things, there's warning. There's a lot of warning. With the volcanoes, there's a lot of warning. There's volcanoes erupting right now all over the planet. I don't know how many. A lot of them. Forms of eruption, like, once in a while, every few years, some smoke comes out. That's it. But that's a form of eruption. That's giving a signal to people to say, you don't want to be living here because this is going to get worse. But if they don't if they're so attached to the fact that this has been happening for years, and even grew up with it happening every so often, they see it in their history books and everything else, and so they don't think that it's going to actually be one of those times where all of a sudden the lava is just going to come out and pour over everything for hundreds of miles around, and maybe go into the Mediterranean and basically cause the Mediterranean to become dead, the entire Mediterranean, which is one of the vials that are being poured out to come, being talked about as to come in the 7 vials that are being poured out, which seem to be happening the most identifiable as the part of the 6th seal. I'll zip over here too. No, I won't, because I didn't put it there this time. But I'll go over to the 6th seal where it talks about that. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to go over to 16. Yeah, I might as well click over here, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Chapter 16 is it's not the first mention of this, but this is the actual. This isn't when it's talked about happening. I meant to do that, show that in Revelation 6 actually, back where I was, where it says that the day of wrath. Okay, so this great day, for the great day of wrath, that's happening in Revelation 6:17 is where that's depicted. And that's during the 6th seal. It's after a whole bunch of stuff has happened already. And the chief captains and the mighty men and the bondmen and every free man, they all hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains. So they went underground into their shelters and their underground cities and Cheyenne Mountain and wherever other places there are, where the military has their facilities, where they're preparing to go for whatever reasons they think they're going to go there, whether they're related to the scripture or not. It doesn't make any difference. But this day of wrath is talked about in other places. I think in Revelations 15 talks about it. Oh no, right here, Revelation 15:7. And one of the 4 beasts, actually 4 living beings in this case, not beasts, living beings, beings that evolved out of the mammalian condition, gave unto the 7 angels, 7 messengers, that's angels is a messenger, 7 crew members, 7 golden vials full of the wrath of God. That's the anger of God, who liveth forever and ever. Okay, so there's the wrath talked about again. Okay, then Revelation 15:8. And the temple was filled with the smoke from the glory of the Lord. And that smoke is the prayers of the saints. The people that are right now even talking to Tiendo or talking to God. The Most High God, not the God of the illusion of wealth being their God, and the illusion of spirituality, enlightenment, they're being like a finger on the hand of God because they accept it, they believe it, they are it, they think, just because they feel like they accept it. And, you know, which some of the people that are talking on the spiritual radio programs talk about. And to the New Age community that, you know, of the ye are gods people that, you know, we're all gods, because we're all fingers and hands, but we're just not aware of it. Some of us aren't aware of it, and so the birthing is to become aware of it by just accepting it, and then knowing that you are then after that. So that's how that makes any human that accepts that by their belief alone a god. And if you go out to California and Arizona and New Mexico and Montana and Colorado, and that's where you're gonna, and a lot of other places in the West, you will meet many people who think of themselves, maybe they don't talk exactly in those terms as being a god, but they will talk in, I mean, the Buddhism now is about the Godhead, right? And the Godhead is the universal mind. And it's also the cosmic consciousness. And that's where all that gets way off the track, because it gets way far away from the physical reality of living beings working in a physical environment with their mental capacity, their frequency capacity, their ultra-dimensional capacity to work with the physical structures in such a way that they're invisible when they want to be invisible, and their spacecrafts can be invisible, and yet they can be right in front of us, and they can move things with their mind. They can do things. They can make a mountain fall with their mind, because they had grown so. Their mind had grown so powerful. But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't make a mountain move with their mind unless they had a reason to. So I guess they could make an earthquake happen by the strength of their mind. Now, I'm not saying that they do it that way. I mean, they may use a tool to do it. They may have a way of programming the sun. Like there have been many sightings of objects going into the sun, or being a sun graze or comet that goes into the sun and then comes out the other side. It's not supposed to be able to do that, because it's just supposed to be, you know, a ball of rock and ice, right? That's charged by the sun, but it is, you know, how in the world these small objects, sometimes, you know, as big as a bus, or even as big as Hale-Bopp, which was a lot of times, many times bigger than that. I don't remember exactly how big it was, but it was considered to be a pretty big object, or two objects actually. It had a double nucleus, according to the scientists that meet every year, that were meeting every year for a while in there anyway, to talk about the Hale-Bopp comet, because of all the anomalies and the evidence that they wanted to comb over of what that comet really was. Not that they knew that it was a spacecraft or the companion object ever. They might have thought it was just another phenomena that they just weren't aware of existed before, and that is where you could have a nucleus that was two objects actually in orbit around one another, the same way that Pluto is in orbit with the moon Charon, to where they're in orbit around each other. So they're orbiting something essential to them both. And I think there's another situation where that's like that. I forget what it is now in our solar system. And also locked to one another, so they only see one side of one another. Like, so we only see one side of the moon, ever, even though the moon does rotate. But it's because it's, I guess it's, I forgot the reason why that happens. But, So Revelation 15:8, I don't think I finished it. After it talked about the 7 vials full of the wrath of God, so the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no man was able to enter into the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled. Now, the temple is the next level spacecraft. But it's I believe it's the New Jerusalem. It's the new the spacecraft that's going to be, well, right before it's removed. It's going to be removed from the earth. It's when the heaven is separated, departs from the earth in Revelation 6, like a scroll. It rolls up. So that happens before these 7 plagues happen, and the 7 vials are the 7 plagues, the calamities. And the vial, you can look at it, also boils down to the same thing. That's an affliction, a calamity. And so one of those calamities, like I was talking about before, I'm going to have to go through all these calamities one time, okay? Because this first one is a really interesting one. Talks about it's only going to affect those that take on the mark of the beast. So only the people that receive that marking, that whether it's a tattoo or a RFID chip or whatever it is, because it's not just that; it's also the number of his name, and on the hand or the forehead, and so that it could also imply that it's their loyalty to the beast in their minds. They're giving their allegiance to the beast, even though they don't know that they're giving an allegiance to the beast. It just so happens that the beast, in this context, is that word that means poisonous animal, bestial man, brutal, bestial man, savage. That's what all that means, wild. And that's all the humans that have not received a deposit or a tagging, any form of deposit from the next level. And of course we don't know who those are and how many of them there are, although we have an indication that there's 144,000 that did receive those tags. I think we can count on that number, even though it might not be, well, it might be exact, because that's been said in enough ways to make it look like it's exact. But I'm not going to go through that right now, because then I'll be over there in chapter 14 trying to talk about that. Well, I do want to get through something substantial in this this video, and so the one was the second one. I'm not going to talk about the first one right now, although I have some idea that some of it has to do with the vaccination programs, because this grievous sore, this noisome and grievous sore, well, the mark actually translates as a stamp, an imprinted mark, but it also has to do with engraving. So that's a carving, like a sculpture, a graven work. And so when I heard that, I thought, wow, it's like, taking a needle to someone's arm, So a tattoo, could be that. But but there was also, I'm not going to go into more detail about that. So I want to get to the second one, Revelation 16:3. Because I may be wrong about that part. And that might be, I mean, the vaccination program is the forced vaccination program I'm talking about. Because that's being considered now. I mean, it's actually in law now for kids that go to public school in parts of California, maybe all of California, have to be vaccinated to a certain protocol. And I think that's wreaking havoc with the people that know in their hearts that that there's a potential danger to that. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to be in danger, but there's a certain collateral damage. So the second vial is 16:3, and it talks about every living soul dying in the sea, and I'm going to end it with that.